Are you ready, son?
I'm ready to go.
Awesome. Hello. Welcome to Hard Compounded American Take on Formula One. We've just finished watching Australian Grand Prix, filled with much drama, some controversy. We have a content-rich episode for you. This will be a good one. Patrick, son, can I get your quick take on Austria?
Yeah, my take on Austria and pretty much the same thing for the previous race in Great Britain at Silverstone. It's 3 words. We're going to call it 3 words. It's sort of 4 words. But it is that this is F1. These 2 races really captured the spirit of Formula One. I felt, at least, they were fast. They were exciting. Lots of drama. We had massive crashes. We had, fights for the championship. Pretty much just had everything. Massive crowds, very partisan crowds. It was just exciting all around. And I think, these 2 races in particular this season, which has been a great season so far, I think, newcomers to the sport, people who haven't watched F1 before and are maybe interested in watching, these 2 races are probably some of the best 2 races that you can start watching in F1. They were tons of fun. If you don't like these races, then you're not going to like Formula One.
Yeah, that's true. That's a great point. You and I last week were on opposite coasts of this great country celebrating its independence, and we declined to do a Silverstone podcast, but that was not because of the quality of the race. It was a great one, a classic one. And it's funny just how partisan the fans are. Red Bull is located a few miles from that track, but the fans showed up partly to cheer on Lewis, to cheer on George and Lando, and to hate on Max.
Yeah.
And then the very week later, we get Max fans showing up, the Orange Army, 50, 60,000 of them, hoping to see their guy win. So that was that, you're right. These were 2 great races to start with if you're the new F1 fan. Bypass Netflix Drive to Survive, at least for the day, and catch these 2 races on F1 TV. I think my quick take, and I'm going to game the system because I actually had 2. My first one was, yay, double points for Haas. the pseudo-American team, double points. I love to see it, and they competed. It wasn't a fluke. But I think really, in my view, the main story of Austria was Charles made a statement. I think he felt, wrongly in my view, that the team did not support him in Silverstone. I think he's just having a brutal time competing with Max. I think Max is the best driver on the grid and has a slightly better, slightly more reliable car. And he's now got a teammate, Carlos Sainz, who says, "Hey, this is my car, my team. I'm going to go for this championship." Charles battled. He did it. He won. I was happy for him. So that is my quick take. My main story for Austria was Charles made a statement in Max's home race.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. If you look at it, Ferrari, 2 wins in a row. Sainz first in Silverstone, and then Leclerc here in Austria. They are coming on. Some potentially odd decisions made at Ferrari at the British Grand Prix with Leclerc, and I can understand his frustration there, like you mentioned. But and then in Austria, Sainz has a big ol' engine blow up, which is no fun. Leclerc's had to deal with that a couple of times already this season. So we're still seeing some Ferrari reliability issues. But, the fight for the championship, both constructor championship and driver championship, I feel is really still on halfway through the season. And that's very exciting. It makes for, a thrilling second half of the season to come. Which I'm excited for.
Yeah, we're halfway through the season, and there are still 2, maybe 3 teams, maybe 5 drivers that can compete for championships, constructors championships, and the driver championships. And this is great. I'm loving it. It seems like Mercedes has fixed most of their problems, at least all the ones that were fixable. They have far better reliability. They are still in the hunt. Certainly in the hunt for a constructors championship, I think. Ferrari, I don't know. They just seem to, between strategic missteps, miscommunication, and just what seems like multi-generational reliability issues, they should be fighting this. And Charles is just a little bit behind Max in the driver championship. Ferrari's in second place in the constructors. This is going to get good. And what I'm hoping is it gets good because these are great drivers and great cars, and it's not coming down to some sort of reliability concern or some fluke in the garage, in the paddock, because this is great stuff. I think 2022 is turning out to be better than 2021. Another great story, speaking of 2022 and Austria, Mick Schumacher gets points, was driver of the day. He was fighting against Lewis and others. That was great to see. What did you think of that?
Well, he had a great qualifying to start. Did really well in qualifying, which is exciting. Then we had another sprint race this weekend. So second one of the season, I think. And he, was right there with his teammate, Kevin Magnussen, and Lewis Hamilton rolled up on him. And Mick scrapped and fought and just took, I don't know, he made Hamilton work. And who would have thought that? Mick Schumacher in a lowly Haas, fighting back against Lewis Hamilton, forcing him to do everything in his power to get by. Just great driving, great defensive driving in the sprint. And then, we saw him pretty upset that he wasn't given the opportunity to get past Magnussen, his teammate, after the race. He was pretty upset. And we saw today in the actual race itself that Mick was faster, and he did a great job and really made some big strides forward. And from scoring his first ever points in F1 last week in Silverstone, he comes back and gets some big time points this weekend. I think he's starting to figure something out in that Haas, and it's showing some pace, and that's really exciting to see.
It is. Everyone, I think, is cheering for Mick. He seems like a great guy. I had some doubts, but first ever points, he was battling Lewis. I think he outraced his teammate, Kevin Magnussen, who's a solid driver. Last year, in the heat of the championship battle, Lewis, in my opinion, sort of stuck it to Max more than was needed. And there was this sort of evolution where Max, who is just an amazing talent, a great driver, fierce, but there was this sort of ruthless resolution after Silverstone last year, and Max said, "I'm going to do whatever it takes to win." I don't think we've had that moment yet with Mick Schumacher, but when he stood in front of the media and complained that his team wasn't doing enough, that he had the better pace, that he should have been allowed to go ahead of his teammate Kevin Magnussen, I think that was his first big step into saying, I have to just sort of embrace the ruthless determination that is necessary to succeed in F1. And, he seems like such a great guy, such a nice guy, but I think we're seeing him sort of embrace that final ingredient, which is the ruthlessness. So I love to see it. On the opposite end of the spectrum, though, Carlos Sainz gets his first win just last week. He's battling again this week for possible victory in Austria. At a few laps remaining, just engine dies. Just more heartbreak for Sainz and Ferrari.
Yeah, it was really unfortunate to see. I think Leclerc was certainly much faster than Sainz was, but a P2 finish was pretty much guaranteed for him. He was going to pass Verstappen, and his engine blew up, made a massive fire. Actually, ended up being kind of a scary moment, with the car just sort of rolling backwards down on a hill towards the track on fire, and Sainz can't get out of it. But he ended up being okay, which is always a good thing. But yeah, just really unfortunate for him, coming off of his first victory in F1, looking really racy, definitely starting to get a feel for that car, and I think this is good for Ferrari. I think it will help both drivers there sort of to battle each other and to know that they can compete with each other. But until that reliability is sort of ironed out, we're still going to get some unfortunate results, I think, for these two really, really good young drivers, in Carlos and Leclerc.
You mentioned the fire. You and I have been watching F1 for so long. We've seen many of these, little smoke coming out, a few flames. The driver pulls over to the side. He gets out. It appeared to be exactly that. And then another couple seconds go by, and it's like, oh, the flames are getting a little bigger. And another couple seconds go by, and it's like, wait, the car isn't actually stopped. It's now rolling downhill. And then another couple seconds is like, wait, Carlos is still in the car. I think that's something that will be looked at, because it seemed like everything that should have gone right mostly did, but with a couple of wild cards that really could have, been catastrophic. Nothing happened. He got out. We don't know the extent of the damage to the Ferrari, but there were a few tense moments there watching that. And speaking of tense moments, Alonso. I don't want to compare him to Job from the Bible, but the man cannot seem to get a break. I don't know. It's like he's had so many bad cars over the years. He could even, compete in the sprint. His team seemed to let him out an unsafe, an unsafe release. His car just didn't seem to have the pace, but he managed somehow to get points. And the F1 feed that I was watching this morning thankfully gave us a lot of views of some of those midfield battles. I mean, there were a couple of great ones, him against Zhou, K-Mag, Norris. There was one when they were all grouped together, and I thought Crofty was just going to just go lose it. But that was great. So I was happy to see Alonso somehow get points. But and Alpine, shockingly, is tied with McLaren in the constructors. But man, I think the man's talents are not just superior to his car, but radically superior to the cars he's driven over the last, let's say, 7-8 years in F1.
Yeah, agreed. Alonso is a phenomenal driver, crazy talent. He embraced that ruthless determination long ago. You can see it on display pretty much every week in his, like you said, his midfield battles. He will not let anything go. He won't let anybody pass easily, and he will go for pretty much every gap that he sees. He's definitely a very fun driver to watch. I think, he's definitely had struggles with the cars that he's been in. This Alpine it actually goes along pretty well, but it just can't compete with the top three teams for sure. Which, it is a disappointment when you're an incredible talent like Fernando Alonso is, and there's just no way that you can compete for wins regularly. Maybe here or there may be an opportunity, but at pretty much every race, he's desperately trying to get a top 5 finish at best, pretty much, which is unfortunate to see. But I mean, a 40-year-old duking it out with some young guns and fighting tooth and nail is still fun to watch.
Yeah, it is. Love watching Fernando, even still, and we'll probably only get another year or two of it. You mentioned he always, he sees the gap, he goes for it. George Russell hit Sergio Perez today. And this, I think, will have a significant impact on both the driver championship. Sergio's now fallen to 3, a distant third, behind Max and Charles. And I think this will have a significant impact on the Constructors' Championship. Red Bull got no points today for Sergio. Now, George Russell got a 5-second penalty. It seems to me that FIA is encouraging collisions, if that's what the penalty is. I think if you can take out a rival and only get a 5-second penalty, that is absolutely worth it. So the FIA needs to, in my opinion, say, look, this is a racing incident. These guys are going wheel to wheel. Maybe Sergio turned in too late. Whatever they say, and say it's a racing incident. But to me, the notion of you can knock someone off the track and the FIA say you did that and you should be punished for it, but the punishment is 5 seconds seems, ludicrous. That was a huge gain for Russell and Mercedes in the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship. A huge hit to Red Bull and Sergio Perez for a 5-second penalty. I think it's worth it. I think FIA is saying this is worth doing. And I don't think they should be saying that. Do you have any thoughts on that Russell-Sergio collision and the FIA's response?
Well, I entirely agree with the point that you're making. Personally, that collision I felt was exactly the same as the Albon-Vettel collision, maybe, in the sprint race, that Albon got a 5-second penalty for. I think that was the wrong decision by the stewards. I believe they were both very obvious racing incidents. I was shocked when they gave them penalties because, I don't know, people can debate this all day long, but in my view, what are these guys supposed to do? They're driving down, they take the inside line. I mean, that's their line to take. The guys going around the outside know that that's a precarious position to be in. And, if the guys on the inside get some understeer, which they seemed to, it's pretty natural for the guy on the outside to get clipped. I don't see anything wrong with the way that Russell or Albon drove that corner. I guess...
Yeah, because it looked to me, I think that was, you bringing up Albon, I think that's a good point. And I want to make sure listeners understand, I'm not accusing Russell of anything. In my view, he got the elbows out. He got the elbows out as wide as he could. And that took Sergio out. I feel that's hard racing. I'm okay with it. I was okay with it with Albon Vettel. I was okay with it in other incidents and last year. I just feel that FIA may need to have some more clear guidance, but also, if Russell did something bad and the FIA is claiming he did and they have penalized him for it, then there needs to be some sort of real pain with that penalty. 5 seconds while taking out a rival is ludicrous.
Yes, agreed. So that was kind of where I was going, right? Is like it's just weird. The penalties that they hand out, right? Is if you're saying that Russell did do something wrong, then him taking a 5-second penalty when he inevitably has to come into the pits anyways is really not that big of a deal. He'll make his way back up through the field and eventually finish fourth. Whereas Perez has to retire from the race. That's a massive gap there. And I think, well, I agree with you, that those sort of punishments need to be maybe more severe in order to discourage that kind of thing from happening. If you're saying that this is actually, the fault of George Russell. But to that end, I would say, what do you want Russell to do there? Completely back out and get nailed from behind? Like, I don't understand what you want in that situation. So I think, there do need to be some, like you said, more clear guidance, sort of more strict regulations around this to make sure that the drivers are aware of what they can and can't do or what they should or shouldn't do in a particular situation. But yeah, I mean, again, if we go back to last year at Silverstone, Hamilton taking out Max, I think he was actually given a 10-second penalty, Hamilton was. So they decided that he did do something wrong, but he ended up coming back and winning the race anyways. Whereas Verstappen crashed out and had to go to the hospital. I don't think that these sort of penalties are... I think you're right. Like, it encourages maybe unsafe driving, which is sort of not the point, right?
Right. We want them obviously to prioritize safety, but then, at least in my view, secondarily is prioritize hard racing. That's why we're watching this. And I'm not sure right now they're doing either, which is the problem. So, you mentioned the Albon incident that happened during the sprint. What do you think of sprints? Because I love them. And if I were paying money, a lot of money, to go watch the drivers on a Saturday, I would love that there was a sprint happening instead of qualifying. But it seems that a lot of people don't like them. I'm not sure I understand why. But I just wanted to get your feelings on the sprints.
I am with you. I love the sprints. More racing is better, right? I don't understand why you wouldn't want more racing. I don't understand the people or any of the arguments against the sprints. It's fun. It's exciting. It's all out for 20-ish laps at some of the best tracks on the F1 calendar. What is there not to enjoy about this? It's weird to me that you can kind of dislike Formula One racing on a Saturday, but really like it on a Sunday. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. And that's with these people that don't like sprints. Like, that's how I view their outlook, which, I don't know, doesn't make sense to me. But
yeah, it does not. Now, I suppose you could not like sprints because of the potential points gained. Does that favor the top teams because that's just yet another channel for them to accumulate points? I'm not sure. But let's see. Speaking of points, it stands now Red Bull 359, Ferrari 303. Mercedes a distant third, halfway through the season at 237. That's actually, with 11 races to go, Mercedes with clearly superior reliability, and I think having improved their car over the season, this to me looks like a great second half of the F1 season headed our way. That's a pretty close battle, I think. What do you think?
Agreed. I think Ferrari have looked superior on certain tracks. Red Bull have looked better on others. And Mercedes have picked up the pieces anytime any of those four drivers for Red Bull or Ferrari have not finished the race, where at least not finished where they should. And if they keep doing that and get a couple results here or there, they can get right back into that fight, which I think is a scary prospect for Red Bull and Ferrari, and I think a scary prospect for the future for Red Bull and Ferrari. If Mercedes, in their worst season since 2012, 2013, has sort of figured out a way to get back into the Constructors' Championship. But yeah, this I think is going to be a very fun second half of the season, and I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Yep. Top five. Why don't you give me your top five drivers this weekend? Let's include the sprint for Austria.
Yeah, sure. This was definitely a fun weekend, and I think Ferrari Power really did a great job this weekend. So to start out my top five, number one has to go to the race winner, Charles Leclerc. He had extreme pace. He looks like, for the most part, the only driver on the grid that can sort of challenge Max regularly. If not for some reliability issues, he would be, ahead of Max in the championship, or maybe just a couple of points behind. So he drove another great race this weekend. In the sprint, he was able to fend off his teammate Carlos Sainz, and then showed great pace in the race on Sunday. Number two, I actually do have Carlos Sainz. I know his engine ended up blowing up, so he couldn't finish the race, but he was fighting with his teammate all the way through the sprint, and then he was coming back at Verstappen in the race today. I think it was a clear 1-2 for Ferrari until that engine issue for Sainz. But, he ran a great race up until that point, and I mean, nothing he could do. So he's number 2, though. I think he was just a little off the pace of Leclerc. 3, I have Lewis Hamilton. I thought he was really quite good. Showed a lot of pace, was very calm. Scrapped it out really hard with Mick Schumacher in the sprint, but ended up, getting onto the podium in the race. He sort of was able to navigate any sort of issues in front of him, showed good pace, just an all-around solid performance from Lewis Hamilton. And then, speaking of a fun fight with Mick Schumacher, he is 4th for me this weekend. I thought, he was really quite fun to watch. Duking it out with Hamilton, with his teammate Kevin Magnussen, getting up into, I think he finished 6th, actually. It was a great finish for Mick Schumacher. Just a really solid and fun performance from him. And then in 5th, I have Lando Norris. In what appeared to be a really bad McLaren, he ended up having a pretty solid race, fighting those mid-pack battles and finishing just behind Schumacher.
That's a good list. You mentioned Lando and McLaren. I am not sure why they are still having so many problems. They are a distant tied for 4th in the constructor. Alpine, 81 points, I believe it is, along with McLaren, and that should not be. My top 5, quite similar. Charles at 1 and Carlos at 2. Both had great weekends. Both had great races. I think if it had not been for Ferrari reliability, Carlos would have gotten 2nd on the podium. 3rd, I have Max. Max just dominated in the sprint, and he had a very solid race. He jumped out to the lead. He complained about tire degradation issues, and watching some of the battles he had with Leclerc, where it just didn't seem like he could match him for pace, it seemed to be that was a legitimate complaint. But I think overall, solid weekend, and so I have him 3rd. My 4th, like you, Mick Schumacher. First ever points in F1. He's ready to go toe-to-toe with his teammate and with Lewis Hamilton and others, and I love to see that. And in 5th place, I actually have Alonso. Awful Saturday, and a sort of awful Sunday, but he managed to get points despite the car, despite the team. And so I had him just edging out Lewis, who I had at 6th.
Nice.
Now, virtual podium. That's where we award someone or something that's not a driver. For me, this week, and it's really a carryover from last week, it's the halo. I never liked the halo. I don't like the look of the halo. And it continues to prove me wrong. There was that terrible crash that Joe had last week. We've seen crashes that Lewis has had, Leclerc, Alonso, and the halo just it does exactly what it's intended to do, and it protects driver safety. It might even be saving lives. So for me, this week, and including last week, I'm putting the halo on the virtual podium.
Yes, absolutely. It definitely deserves to be up there after after the scary crash that Joe had last week. I mean, it's just a pretty remarkable addition to Formula One cars, and it's proven to really save a number of drivers' lives in the last several years since its implementation. You know, there were a lot of drivers that fought back against the addition of the halo, you know, for visibility issues or what have you. But I think pretty much nobody on the grid now is complaining about it after just what they've seen it be able to do in terms of safety for them. We pretty much always include it after a massive crash. But yeah, it definitely deserves to be noted up here on the virtual podium. For me, I mean, definitely same thing. I had the halo on there as well. But also I just, you know, something a little more light. I have just Austria on here. This track in Spielberg, Austria, I think is one of the most scenic places that F1 goes to. It's just beautiful there. And, you know, I think it deserves to be recognized. So,
no, that's a great one because it's beautiful and it's a fast track. It's a fun track. The fans show up. It's raucous. And it's just, it's always a great race. So I love to see it. So yeah, Austria and the halo both make it onto the virtual podium. Now, before we switch to the soft compound, we did not give our top 5 for Silverstone for last week. So I just wanted to do a quick run through there. I'll go first. Carlos Sainz took the pole, took the win, his first win, and he loved it and he deserved it. I then have Sergio Perez, keeps fighting. Everyone wants to say that Red Bull has a number one driver and it's Max Verstappen, and this is true. But whenever Sergio can fight and compete and win, Red Bull always lets him. I love that. Third, I have Hamilton. I tell you, Hamilton seemed like the first 9 or so races, the car wasn't great. George, his teammate, was out racing him. He didn't seem like he was having as much fun in F1. But he's really turned it around these last few races, and Silverstone, he showed up. I had, surprisingly, Mick Schumacher as fourth in my driver standings, because that was another race. We've really started to see a progression. The Haas car, when it's running, is decent, and Mick is willing to battle. And then my fifth is Fernando, who I just think every week, you know, there have been some weeks this year, I hate to say it, where I don't think Lewis Hamilton brought his best. There have been some weeks, I hate to say it, over the past few years where I don't think Sebastian Vettel has brought his best. Fernando Alonso brings it every single race, every single week, and I put him at number 5.
Nice. I think that's a really solid top 5. For me, this is actually a really hard top 5 to put together because I thought so many drivers just drove really, really well.
That was a fun race for sure.
Definitely. But I have to agree with you. Sainz, number 1. The pole and the win is first in F1. He drove a great race, was very fast the whole time. And, you know, held off attacks from Perez and Hamilton, and was just really solid. Great to see him get his first win in F1. Then I thought that Hamilton was the second best driver of the day. I agree with you. He looked a little sluggish, down on himself in the first number of races, not 9 or so races, like you said. And his teammate George Russell was beating him consistently. But in this race, he really fought hard. He drove really well. And I think, he was close to actually getting a win. And I think that is something that really gave him a boost and definitely helped him out this week as well. Then, like you mentioned, Sergio Perez is my number 3. He basically came all the way from the back of the pack and ended up P2, I think. So just a great performance from him. The Red Bull was very fast, but it is not difficult to make your way through the entire field and get up there close to a win. Then I have in 4th, 4, 5, and 6 are very close for me. 4th, I have Alonso. Like you said, just a wily veteran, super quick, does not give an inch. Great race in Silverstone. Just job well done to him. He was a lot of fun to watch last week. And then 5, I have to say that I think Schumacher just edges out Leclerc for 5. Schumacher gets his first points in F1. Really solid finish. Beats his teammate, which is always a good feeling, to go along with your first points in F1, and was absolutely fighting to the very last meter of track against Verstappen, which you never would have thought you'd see this season. But just a great job to Mick Schumacher. And like I said, honorable mention, Charles Leclerc.
Yeah, that was great. And it's funny because we do not discuss this beforehand, and we had the same 5 in the top 5, just a couple swaps. So that was great. And yeah, Mick fighting and frustrating Max Verstappen last week was great to watch. Almost as much fun as him getting his first points this week. Let's switch to the soft compound. I want to talk firstly about Lewis and George. I really like that Red Bull is letting Sergio do whatever he can. I like that Ferrari is letting Charles and Carlos battle it out. In the past few years, when Mercedes had the clearly dominant car, it was clearly Lewis was the number 1. George is now the new guy. He's outraced Hamilton, in my view, over the first half of the season. Hamilton's now coming on, though, so we'll see if that sticks. But Sky Sports had an interesting question. They polled their readers, who do they think will win a race this year first, George or Lewis? I think that's a great question. Now, their readers overwhelmingly selected Lewis. I'm not so sure. I think that George is still proving to be the better racer at Mercedes. And, it's funny because I think George was even asked, is beating Lewis his first year on the team, is beating Lewis going to be sort of like, that's what made his season? And of course, George said the political thing. No, of course, winning is what makes the season. Winning the championship, winning the constructors, that's what makes the season. But I think, these guys are F1 drivers. They absolutely want to win, and that starts with beating their teammate. Any thoughts on the George-Lewis dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're both really excellent drivers, and they both really, really want to win and really, really want to beat their teammate. That, I think, does not change for any F1 driver except maybe Valtteri Bottas. But no, I think it's great to see Lewis have a little inter-team competition. And I think he has started to figure it out. And, 2 races ago, I would have said absolutely George Russell will win a race before Lewis Hamilton this season. After this weekend, I'm not so sure about that. Hamilton seems to drive very much on emotion and confidence. That's not to say that he is emotional when he drives, but just that I think he needs to get up for a race. And when he does, there's very few drivers that can match him. And I think, after this week, we're starting to see him get into that frame of mind where he was not there in the previous 9 races.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
I will agree, I think, with the Sky Sports readers and viewers that I actually do think Hamilton will be the first Mercedes driver to win a race this season, though I will not be shocked if George wins prior to Lewis.
Yep, good. With the possible exception of Alonso, I think nobody has more sort of racecraft knowledge and sort of accumulated sort of, tools than Lewis Hamilton. And we saw that last year. Max, in my view, was clearly the best driver on the grid and absolutely was last year. But Hamilton's just sort of accumulation of knowledge allowed him to keep that battle going until the very last race. But he is older. George is a massive talent. In his first year with the team, I think he's outraced Hamilton by a bit. And so I would vote that George gets the first win before Lewis. It'll be interesting to watch. Now, for anyone who thought he left, where the hell has Danny Riccardo been? I believe he eked out a point today, maybe 2. I think he came in 9th. But he's just been a continued disappointment. So much so that one of Zach Brown's main jobs running McLaren now is responding to press inquiries on whether or not Danny Riccardo will be back next year. The first time this was brought up, Zach strongly implied he might not be. And then he's backtracked repeatedly. However, this week we hear that the American driver Colton Herta will be testing McLaren this week. And there were even some rumors that Oscar Piastri is working on a deal to be Lando's teammate next year. I think those are baseless rumors, but the Colton Herta is for real. Him testing with McLaren again this week. I'm now of the view that Ricciardo will be back next year. He's a popular driver. He's a capable driver still. The McLaren car does not seem to be improving. And so getting rid of Ricciardo a year earlier, I'm not sure there's much to gain. But I did want to get your thoughts on what's going on with Ricciardo and McLaren.
Yeah, it's been really disappointing from Riccardo really since joining McLaren. But yeah, I mean, he had, some interviews this weekend where, he got a lot of questions about why he was struggling with the car or if there was anything wrong with the car or anything like that. And he was very, I guess the word he used was political. He didn't really say anything negative about the car, even though I think everybody can see that it's kind of crap. It's not a very good car, and he is having issues with it. He's always been a good driver in Formula One, but constantly getting beat rather badly by your teammate is not a good look. And it just seems like McLaren and Ricciardo are kind of in this limbo where neither one can say much about the other, and neither one is really helping the other. And it's just sort of a weird situation. So I think for that reason, McLaren might want to just move on from him so that there's nothing else surrounding them. There's no looming cloud. But yeah, I think it's exciting that Colton Herta, a really solid young Indy driver, is testing with them. And I think, if he's the next up-and-coming driver, whether it's next season or the following for McLaren, that would be really exciting to see.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'd love to see him make the jump from Indy to F1. All right, quickly, I'm going to ask the stewards. I saw a lot of people praising Sebastian Vettel, a good guy, from what I can tell, praising him for his helmet design, which talked about how we need to do more for bees. Now, I will occasionally go onto the internet, and I've been told that there is a global bee crisis, and we should add that to the very many other crises that are taking place right now. And so I'm fine with this. He wants to have us do more to help bees. I have no idea what that possibly is that I could do to help bees, but good for Sebastian Vettel. However, I would like to make this request of Formula One. We see so many new fans entering the sport. Drive to Survive has helped that. We see so many new Americans entering the sport. All these new fans from America and around the world. I love it. I want to encourage it. But there was a time when Formula One drivers were all swagger. Now, I don't mean James Hunt swagger. You don't have to be that. But, I mean, a Save the Bees helmet, it's just sort of like, look, we may have gone a little too far in one direction. Am I off base on this? Should I just praise Sebastian for his Save the Bees helmet and all the causes he publicly supports? Or is it too much to ask for some swagger back in Formula One?
Well, first of all you have to do to help bees is plant some wildflowers.
I did not know that.
But I don't know. I think helmet designs can be really cool. I mean, I think there are too many weird and random rules and regulations around Formula One and concerning what the drivers are allowed to do or not do, to wear or not wear, what they can say, what they can bring to the paddock. There's all these sort of weird things that make the sport just like more awkward than it needs to be. And yeah, so I'm with you. Let's let the drivers do whatever the hell they want to do, or anyone that is down there. Just let them be who they're going to be.
Yeah, and I like that be who you're going to be. And look, I'm happy for the popularity and success of F1. Where it is compared to 10 years ago and 40 years ago is remarkable. I don't expect a James Hunt again. I don't believe a Frank Williams can piece together a team and compete and win. But a little swagger, I think, would be fun. Across the line, Patrick, as you know, that's our segment where we make our predictions for the following race. We choose who we think will be in the top 5. Once a driver is selected, he is not available to the other host. If we are right, we get 1 point. If we select the driver and get him in the right spot, we get 3 points. So, before we make our selections, Patrick, can you give me the standings?
Yes. So, we each scored 2 points in the last race.
Not great.
Yeah, no, pretty poor. But we are now 11 races into the season. So that is exactly halfway through the season since we have no Russia. So only 22 races this season. And now you and I are separated by 1 point. Your 38 to my 37. So, like the actual on-track championship fights that are going on, coming down to the second half of the season, it's still all up for grabs in across the line.
It is, but 38-37 is there's a Alpha Williams element to that. I like to think our predictions would be far better, but it's a tough assignment.
I think it's more of a Haas Aston kind of a thing. But.
Okay, I'll take that one. All right, who goes first?
You have the first pick this week.
Yay! And so the next race is at Paul Ricard, France. I am going to go. Max won that last year. I'm going with Max to win it this year.
Mm-hmm. Yep, not a bad pick. All right, let's see. I think, they've looked really pacey, fast in a straight line. Well, actually, fast in high-speed corners, I think, is where Ferrari really excels. But Leclerc has been the challenger all season, so I'll put him as my first challenger to you for next race. And with my second pick, I think I'm going to go with a Mercedes, and that Mercedes is going to be Lewis Hamilton.
Oh, darn, that's who I wanted to get as second. Nice. Well, then for my second, I will take Perez. I think he will recover from this week's crash, which sent him out. And for third, I will also... I'm going to also go with Mercedes. I'm going to take George for third. George Russell.
Nice. George Russell. That's all right. So let's see. My 3 and 4. This is going to be tough, I think. I think 3, I will go with... Ooh, who am I going to go with? Might as well go with Sainz. He may have to take a grid penalty next week. I'm not entirely sure how many engines he's used. But, it's a fast car. He's a good driver. He may be able to get back up there. Especially if anything crazy happens. Mm-hmm. Let's see. So for 4, might as well take a Frenchman. I will take Esteban Ocon.
Oh, nice. For my 4th, I am going to choose Lando Norris. We've bad-mouthed the McLaren as much as can be, but he's a solid driver and a middling car. I'm going to go Lando Norris. And my 5th will be a Frenchman who I had very high hopes for this season, and he has let me down. Pierre Gasly.
Nice. That is, I hope he does well. He's been struggling this season, as has his teammate Yuki. It would be nice to see the AlphaTauri get up there.
He has. That's been one of the bigger surprises, I think, this season is how poor AlphaTauri has been, and Pierre Gasly is part of that.
Yeah. So my 5th pick. Ooh, this is tough. I already took an Alpine. Not sure if I want to take the other one, but I think I will. Fernando Alonso will be my P5.
Nice. He's been threatening the last several races. So you have Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, Carlos Sainz, Esteban Ocon, and Fernando Alonso is your top 5 at Paul Ricard. In 2 weeks, I believe, I have Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, George Russell in 3rd, Lando Norris 4th, Pierre Gasly in 5th. I think that would be fun if either of us are correct. Now, your crazy prediction. Have any crazy predictions for the French Grand Prix in 2 weeks or the remainder of the season, Patrick?
French Grand Prix. That's a good question. I don't know if I have anything. I think, we'll just go with something real crazy. We'll say the French team, Alpine, they win with the French driver, Esteban Ocon. And we get another French driver, Pierre Gasly, on the podium.
Wow.
It's craziness.
That is crazy. And in fact, I speak no French because I live in America. And, but I encourage everyone to go watch clips, the French language clips of when Pierre Gasly won. That's pretty fun. They squeeze a lot of syllables into a very short amount of time. I will say that about the French announcers. My crazy prediction, it mirrors what happened this week. George took out Sergio, Red Bull. I'm going to say Lewis takes out Max, Red Bull. Oof. And we are going to have a fiery, brutal, ruthless, and fun remainder of the season.
Wow, that would be something. And I guess just quickly to note to everybody, because it was brought up this week, if you cheer when somebody crashes, you're a dick. We'll just put that out there. Don't do that. That's a dick move.
100%. All right. I want to remind our listeners to send their questions and comments to hardcompoundpod@gmail.com. We may read them on the show. We definitely will read them. And I now wish to thank you all for listening to everybody's most beloved father and son F1 podcast. And we are Lights Out.
See ya. Thanks for listening.
All right, awesome show, son. Didn't mean to throw you with the bees thing. I think Sebastian's a good guy, but it's a little tiring to have causes that you need to be supporting every week. And the bees one, I think, just put me over the edge.
That's funny.